Tolkien's monumental work, The Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, revolves around the Fellowship's strenuous and challenging journey to save the Middle-earth from turmoil, war, and suffering by destroying the ring into the Mount Doom. Thousands of years ago, before the Fellowship of the Ring, the Dark Lord Sauron forged the most powerful yet evil One Ring to subjugate the world and to corrupt the minds of those who wore it. The journey began in Shire, where a young hobbit inherited a ring from his uncle Bilbo. Gandalf the wizard figured out that there was the One Ring and urged Frodo to bring it back to Rivendell. There, a council was held, and a team of heroes, the Fellowship of the Ring, decided to destroy the ring. However, over the course of the journey, the Fellowship broke apart due to several reasons. One of the main reasons, however, is an important lesson we can all learn from. A group, especially one with low cohesiveness, relies on having a great leader to work well together.
Indeed. So, after the release of the film adaptation, what happened to the Fellowship had become one of the most talked about topics by the audience. We too had some burning questions about why the Fellowship, which consisted of heroes and champions of all races, ultimately broke apart. Well, guess what? We finally managed to replicate a modern version of the Mirror of Galadriel. And it really works. Just by pouring some water into this enchanted silver basin, we can communicate with the descendants of Gandalf, Frodo, and Boromir. Today, we have invited them to help us take a closer and deeper look at their ancestors, telling the truth behind this great journey.
Nice to meet you, Gavin the Black here, the grandson of Gandalf. What do you think of your grandfather, one of the most wisest and powerful wizards in Middle-earth?
I'm really proud to say that my grandfather Gandalf was a great leader. He led the Fellowship of Ring, which consists of leaders of different races and kingdoms. His receptiveness and conscientiousness earned him trust and respect from the team, so that he could lead the team more effectively.
Yeah, there's no doubt that he was the hero of Middle-earth. He played an important role in the success of the team, especially when the team was newly formed. What do you think contributed to his successful leadership?
He united the team by adopting the most appropriate leadership style, a democratic and transformational leadership style.
Can you give us some examples of how he did that and guided this cohesive team?
Sure. First, Gandalf applied democratic leadership, in which he sought advice from the team all the time.
We must get up the mountain! Make for the Gap of Rohan! I take the west road to my city! The Gap of Rohan takes us too close to Isengard!
We cannot pass over the mountain! Let us go under it! Let us go through the mines of Moria! Let the ring-bearer decide.
He analyzed the information and considered the situations with his team, and eventually delegated the task to the appropriate person. By adopting democratic leadership, he promoted inquiry rather than advocacy. He involved the whole team in the decision-making process, which contributed to the team cohesion, as everyone got to share their views and collectively owned their choice.
Democratic leadership seems pretty good. It brings the team together and makes everyone more willing to work toward the same goal. But of course, it's important to note that the Fellowship was suited for democratic leadership style.
Yeah, and more than just democratic leadership, he showed transformational leadership as well, who motivated and inspired team members by establishing a shared vision, inspiring them to continually improve themselves. The best example was when he acted as the mentor of the ring-bearer, Frodo. He first sensed the need for change. His team was likely demoralized by their recent setbacks at Carriages, and Frodo felt unsure of his own ability. Therefore, my grandfather guided Frodo by providing him individualized concern.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
He instilled the sense of mission in Frodo by emphasizing how important it was to defeat the enemy, as Saruman grows ever stronger. This helped Frodo more willing and psychologically able to bear his incredible burden.
Indeed, he was both democratic and transformational. I could also see that he demonstrated a good balance between task-oriented and people-oriented leadership behaviors. And in Moria, he sacrificed himself to save the rest of the team from Balrog. What do you think about that?
You shall not pass!
It was very heartbreaking for him to die, but nonetheless, his sacrifice served as an inspirational motivation and made him an idealized influence on the team. Frodo and the other team members eventually have greater determination and confidence in destroying the ring to save the world. This proved that his leadership style overall helped this incohesive team to fight for one single goal together.
Thank you, Gavin in the Black-haired. But then, without Gandalf, it seems that the team's cohesiveness dwindled.
Well, not immediately. In Lorien, the team still stick with each other and generally agreed on what to do. We could also see that Aragorn assumed de facto leadership, perhaps because of his personality and his lineage as the heir to the throne of Gondor.
Hey, speaking of Gondor, we have Giancarlo, the future steward of Gondor, here with us. Hi Gian, welcome. So, what do you think of the time when Aragorn became the apparent leader?
Thank you for welcoming me. I feel that at first, everyone accepted Aragorn as the temporary leader. They let him negotiate passage to Lorien. As Aragorn did so, my father, Boromir, comforted Frodo and the other members of the Fellowship.
Gandalf's death was not in vain. Nor would he have you give up hope. You carry a heavy burden, Frodo.
This helped limit any unhelpful emotional contagion of fear and anxiety, and in the end, everyone felt less worried as my father spread calm and understanding, and as they were now in a safe place, Lorien.
So, the team was actually united for a while after Gandalf's death. However, team dynamics deteriorated. Gian, many critics viewed Boromir, your father, as an insider of the team conflict. So, what's your stance about it?
My father was an honorable man right until the end. His seeming dishonor arises from a value conflict. Whatever the decision to make, my father Boromir considered his people, our people.
The ring is altogether evil.
It is a gift to the foes of Mordor. Why not use this ring?
Give Gondor the weapon of the enemy. Let us use it against him.
You cannot wield it. None of us can.
Since the very beginning, he believed in using the ring to ward off evil and to protect and empower his people in fighting the Dark Lord.
Wow, it seems very noble indeed. But why did the conflict arise?
This was a task conflict. My father Boromir just had a different idea of what to do with the ring compared to the rest of the team. However, the other members of the Fellowship valued resisting the temptation to use the ring for one's own purposes. They valued destroying it once and for all. But alas, my father never fully dismissed his idea. He often expresses it.
Such a little thing.
Boromir! Give the ring to Frodo.
After multiple instances of wanting to take the ring, task conflict became relationship conflict, as the Fellowship, especially Aragorn and Frodo, became wary of him. Without Gandalf to keep Boromir on board the team's shared objective, my father got into conflict more and more often, especially with Aragorn, whose authority he did not fully recognize.
From a place of strength.
There is no strength in Gondor that can avail us.
You were quick enough to trust the elf. You are afraid. All your life, you have hidden in the shadows, scared of who you are, of what you are.
The discord went both ways, cut both ways, and my father's communication skills leave a lot to be desired too, especially since he was a bit too insensitive and combative at times. But of course, my father is not the only one to blame.
Yes, of course. I'm so sorry that I made you talk about these negative remarks about your dad. And actually, there are other inherent factors that lead to the team's collapse too. Could you talk about them?
The team had low cohesion since the beginning. Almost everyone was a stranger to each other, and unfortunately, there wasn't much time for them to acquaint themselves with each other. This makes them less likely to trust each other or to consider each other's interests. Nevertheless, they managed to get past the forming stage. But then, they struggled a lot with the storming phase. They had to make many big decisions right away. What should they do with the ring? How should they achieve the goal of destroying the ring? At first, there was a group norm of looking to Gandalf for direction, but then, with Gandalf's death, this norm became impossible, and the Fellowship slipped back into the storming phase, which they didn't get out of this time, unfortunately.
Oh, yes. The team was not cohesive from the beginning, and more than that, it seems especially difficult to resolve such conflicts that arise without a mediator, just like Gandalf.
Yes, and I'd say that the nail in the coffin, really, was when my father was suddenly overcome with temptation and aggressively tried to take the ring from Frodo.
I ask only for the strength to defend my feet. If you would but lend me the ring.
No.
No! It is not yours, save by unhappy chance. It could have been mine. It should be mine. Give it to me. Give it to me. No. Give me the ring. No.
That was an actual physical conflict, born out of how in this moment my father Boromir had very high assertiveness and very low cooperativeness. That was the culmination of their value conflict. That fractured the team. That left them vulnerable to an ambush. And unfortunately, that led to my father's untimely death.
Yes, and with such an extreme team conflict, the team eventually broke up. Frodo decided to complete the quest on himself. And this is controversial too. There are diverse opinions about Frodo's leaving. Now, we're happy to have our last guest, Frodo's son, to comment on his father's decision. That is give a warm welcome to Skylar Baggins.
Hi Winnie, thanks for having me. I would say that I definitely support my father's decision on leaving. However, it is understandable that some people may overlook his devotion towards the team's objective. During the time he bore the ring, he frequently doubted himself and was fearful of failure. He felt despair when facing challenges and hesitated to move forward. He has a rather low self-esteem. But luckily, the team, especially Gandalf and Sam, helped him to overcome these weaknesses by showing support and protecting him. I think that's one of the benefits working as a team.
Why did he choose to leave the team despite having good teammates? Do you think this is because of his conscientiousness?
Definitely. My father valued the team objective to destroy the ring a lot. Since the team was fractured at that time, he decided to achieve the goal on his own. This showed that he was really task-oriented and, in a way, individualistic. Besides, the temptations of glory and power brought by the ring were hard to resist. Yet, my father managed to resist them. His self-discipline and dutifulness were absolutely something that I should learn from. And he was also worried that his teammates do not have such strong self-discipline, just like Boromir, so he decided to relieve them of temptation.
Your father's goal commitment was really remarkable. But even the greatest challenge can deter the most conscientious hero. What do you think motivated your father to stick with this mission?
Having a difficult and specific goal is always the key to increase motivation. Such goal can direct a person's attention and effort. Part of the equation is expectancy. He could clearly see that the more effort he exerts, the better performance he is, as he can always think of how he was able to get closer and closer to Mordor with each step. He knows that if he does indeed reach Mountain Doom and destroy the ring, he could finally get his desired outcome to achieve the team's goal and save the whole world from Dark Lord's tyranny. This helped him not get sidetracked by other potentially motivating factors such as glory and heroism, in which actually he did not value these as much as the others do. Nicely complementing my father's goal commitment was that he had developed a very concrete action plan. He knew that the team was fractured at that time, so he decided to first cross River Anduin, and then find a way to cross the dead marshes, and then find a way to cross the Evel Dwarf. These were all very manageable and tractable goals, which he could clearly identify roadblocks and obstacles, and then he can finally devise ways to overcome these obstacles.
Wow. It really seems that by having a clear idea of what he could do at the end of the film, and having a deep-set desire to do so, nothing could stop him from actually doing it. And indeed, he did succeed eventually.
Once again, a big thanks to all our guests today. We have learned a valuable lesson from the Fellowship's journey. A great leader keeps everyone together. When this leader is lost, individual values take precedence, conflict arises, and even a great team may break down eventually. So, if you want to be a respectable leader or a team player, bear in mind this story and things told by the descendants from the Middle-earth.